Josef Janning, ECFR, but also a friend of AICGS a lot. It's great to have you back here.
Pleasure.
What I want to ask you about is the current internal debate about Germany's leadership role. You're working on that a lot, and the question is also not necessarily what's going on in Germany, but what's going on outside of Germany, who's looking at Germany. By the way, that includes Washington. Give us a snapshot of what Germany is struggling with this increasing level of expectation that's being directed to them, not only by Europe, not only by the United States, but other places around the world. How are they handling this?
Well, it's a big challenge. We see that Germany is not just the largest member state, the biggest fish in the pond, but actually is seen by almost everyone in the European Union as the one country to turn to. And that creates expectations. That creates enormous attention. That also creates an enormous potential to actually lead the EU. In the current refugee crisis, we see that this leadership role of Germany is contested because Germany doesn't capture for the moment the what could be a consensus in the EU, but is seen as a demandeur, as a member state demanding a specific outcome. And the intergovernmental structures of the EU allow other member states to kind of duck and cover, to procrastinate, to not strongly implement, not to forcefully object, but also not to really come along. I think that's a big leadership challenge, is that when you are in that position, but your followers are not ready, you haven't done enough in order to get them to sign up.
Is that a hangover from the way the Greek crisis was handled? The demandeur, Germany trying to enforce its own rules on everybody else, and then some people would say later on they get all these immigrants in there, and now they want it to help us bail them out. I mean, kind of, you want your cake and eat it too.
Yeah. Well, in a way, it is a hangover, but in a somewhat indirect way, because I think in the Eurozone crisis there was support for the German position well beyond even the Eurozone. Even in the UK, there was understanding. Current British government has a similar approach to fiscal sustainability. The Danes were in support, and other member states also in the east of Europe, not yet member of the European Union. Mm-hmm. So there, actually, the consensus was much larger. Mm-hmm. In the refugee crisis, the consensus basically has fallen apart, partly because the differences among member states over how to address that are much larger, right, and run much deeper also domestically than on the Eurozone issue. And secondly, because Germany's position has been rather uncompromising in this, because Germany had exposed itself to such a degree that it had only very few choices then to raise at the Brussels table.
Okay, so now the mess is there, the problem is there. Again, Germany is in the lead role. Just spell out in short order, if you were going to sit there with Chancellor Merkel and say, how are you going to get out of this mess, not only domestically, but how do you form a coalition around this issue that doesn't necessarily let the EU fall apart? A lot of people have said, and you and I were just discussing that, some people argue if Schengen falls, then the EU falls apart and it's history. I wouldn't go that far. I don't think you would either. But how does she walk this cat back?
Well, for her, it is clear that Germany does not have the Swedish option. So Germany cannot just say, we're out. We can't, so we're closing our borders. Where Germany is located, with the number of neighbors it has, and the relevance it has for the EU, it has to pursue an EU policy on dealing with the refugee issue. So this is a must for Angela Merkel. At the same time, it is clear that she cannot rely on being able to prevail with her position in this fragmented arena of 28. So she has to focus on building stronger partnerships and more steady coalitions. And in that, I believe she has to reach out to France. This is indispensable for Germany. But she should also be reaching out particularly to the affluent and smaller member states in the EU, many of which happen to be neighbors of Germany. They have the means, the political and the financial means. They share with Germany this huge interest in the economics of integration because they are so beneficial, and they don't want to see that system fall apart. So they also have a vested interest in keeping the integrity of the European Union. To them, Merkel should reach out. The Netherlands is one of those key countries there, currently in the EU presidency. So this is a way to go for her. If you can't get all member states together, get the capable, those with means, with abilities, with money, to follow you in a common policy.
It sounds like you're almost describing a slogan that we've heard before, the coalition of the willing within the EU.
In a way it is, except that the coalition of the willing mostly is used as a kind of an ad hoc strategy. You know, there's an issue coming up, requires somebody to take the initiative, one of the large actors takes the initiative, and a coalition of those willing forms around that actor. I think what we need in the EU is a bit more of a permanent arrangement. You remember when Ursula von der Leyen said Germany wants to lead from the middle,
Right.
which is conceptually somewhat vague. What it means is that Germany wants to lead from a position in the political center of the European Union. But that requires that there must be others in that center.
Right.
You know, so you can't have everyone else sitting out on the fences and Germany being in the ring, but you have to have a number of member states out in the center, eager to find a solution, eager to find a policy response.
And you think that the stakeholding mentality in those other countries is still large enough that they will get into this, under this umbrella with Merkel?
Yes, and I think it is, currently it is underused. Mm-hmm. You know, we used to have, for example, specific roles for the Prime Minister of the Netherlands. When in complicated negotiation situations, usually these small member states, very experienced, trusted by everyone, and knowing everything, they would be the ones to broker a compromise,
Right.
to also bridge the gap that there always was between Germany and France, if the two didn't do it themselves. These roles don't exist anymore. They are now taken by institutional players, President of the European Council, President of the Commission to a certain degree. So these countries feel that they are under-engaged in the current EU, and at the same time they feel that they are neglected by the large member states. So actually it takes a large member state, and then I would suggest it takes Germany and France to actually reach out to them, and Germany can do this reaching out much better than France can do that, and bring them back into a coalition which is not ad hoc alone, but which says basically we want this EU to be our instrument to respond to crises, such as the migration crisis, and we need to empower it. And so we need to have agreement among us as the trigger, the catalyst for an agreement within the EU.
So we go back to the old expression, Europe needs a crisis to go forward. You've got a lot of them at the moment. Yeah. This could be one that could not only perhaps maybe get the traction back on the road for Europe to get its act together and to deal with this issue. Let me end with this question. Do you think it will be a way for Merkel to sustain herself? She's facing an election next year. Yeah. Is this a way out for her?
Yes, well, I think it's almost the only way out for her. And we have to see, 2015 has been a year with 3 major crises, all of them very illustrative about how crises affect the EU. Mm-hmm. And we've seen that this EU, the way it is presenting itself today, is not growing in crisis. But in the Ukraine crisis, it has been the role of Germany and France, right, that essentially then became the EU. But if it hadn't been for that bilateralism, the EU would probably not have been able to respond to it. In the Eurozone crisis, it was very much a Germany plus friends arrangement. In the refugee crisis, we see that even the Germany plus friends formula doesn't work anymore because it's Germany, no friends. You know? So we see that the old mechanism, there's a crisis, EU member states move closer together and somehow bridge their differences and find a way forward. It doesn't work anymore. Now, all of these 3 crises have seen variations of the traditional crisis response. Mm-hmm. Now the EU responds by member state action, by member state preponderance, or by
member state procrastination.
Yeah, member state procrastination, yeah. And so the EU, in effect, gets weaker through crisis. Yeah. And that, I think, that's the signal that should trigger a policy change, a more fundamental reassessment of how to build consensus in the European Union.
Well, as we say in Chicago, never let a crisis go to waste.
Yes.
Good luck.
Thanks.
Thank you for coming.